Hi, that's Richard Little from Your Land Partner, joining you today to talk about the build process, or specifically one of the first parts of the build process, which is pre-construction. And today we are going to concentrate on discharging planning conditions or reserve matters or technical details. Now, this is not necessarily in order of what it's going to be done, but this is obviously something that follows any sort of planning permission that you get. And this would also apply to a degree if you are looking at prior approval, permitted development, less so, but it's really the first part of the paperwork that you're going to be putting together, or an important part of the paperwork you're going to be putting together for preparation for going out for tendering, preparing more detailed specifications, building regs applications, warranty applications, etc. So we've covered previously what conditions are in the planning series, but I'll just very briefly recap. So when you receive planning permission in different ways, it will generally be subject to conditions if you've put a full application in. It will be subject to what we call reserve matters if it's an outline application, and if it's permission in principle, it will be subject to technical details. So all of those three different permissions, those consents, actually mean that you've still got further work to do to actually comply, to actually make sure that the planning permission is actually valid, proceedable. So first of all, I want to sort of say, as we're talking about planning now, often this sort of stuff comes under the remit of your planning consultant or your agent, whoever's handling the planning for you, or if you're doing it yourself. Now, we take a slightly different view than some, and this very much firmly sits in the control or the management of a project manager. So we may have on some projects a pre-construction project manager, and it may well be a different PM once we get on site, but we'll talk about that in a future video. But so whoever is handling this side of things, now the fact that there will be conditions will probably mean that there's perhaps further paperwork to do, so more surveys, more reports, in order to get this done. As I say, whoever's managing it for you, who's ever in charge of it, it needs to be somebody needs to be taking overall control of this process. We use a project manager because this will often be going parallel with other work that's being done in preparation for the build. So there's no right way or wrong way, but we would strongly suggest that it works much better if you've got somebody that's doing the pre-construction who is the project manager. So just very briefly, so if it's full planning permission, then you will be getting conditions. Those conditions are very varied, or numerous. So it could be things, pretty standard things like what materials are going to use for the, for the walls, for the roofs, the windows, lighting, fences, gates, etc. Now, some of this, it doesn't always have to get done prior to, but generally we try and get as much detail sorted as we can and much detail agreed. So this could be on materials, for instance, is, somebody's got to say what bricks are going to be. You often perhaps have to provide samples to the local planning department, maybe get panels built to see what the bricks or the stone or whatever it might look like, or if it's timber or zinc, render, so actually sample panels to sort of so that they can see and actually get it agreed. Now this can take a bit of time, but obviously it's quite important to agree what materials you're going to use, because it's going to have it's going to have a direct relation to potential costs, etc. Other things apart from material finishes, etc., are things like drainage. You might need further drainage reports depending how much you've investigated, how far you've taken it prior to getting that planning consent. Other things like access, you may have to make sure that you can confirm that you can get all the visibility, etc., that has been consented. So it's whatever those conditions are, it's whatever paperwork needs doing, whatever consultants that might need engaging, whatever reports and surveys might need doing. These are very much part of the pre-construction process, pre-commencement effectively from a planning perspective. Yeah. If you've got outline permission, and then most of you hopefully will know by now that the information you've got to provide could be a lot more onerous, because outline permission generally has, or will always have, less detail than full permission. So you may have to have a lot to do here, a lot of surveys, a lot of reports, and this is going to take often getting reserved matters agreed can take quite a long time in the planning to make sure that everything is done and submitted in the right way. And of course it can go backwards and forwards, so it's not just a case of whether you're discharging conditions, whether you're looking for to agree reserved matters, or in the case of permission in principle, the technical details, which again is more information. Whatever one of those you're looking to sort out, it's got to be sorted out before obviously you can get on site. But there will be an element possibly of negotiation, and all of those are the process is by application, and fees will apply. So much per condition sometimes, or so much per batch of conditions, and then there's a fee for reserved matters and also a fee for technical details. So and there is generally a time frame with most local authorities. They will sort of in principle they'll agree to do it in 28 days or whatever it might be, but they may well come back to you and say, well, actually that information is not enough. So never underestimate the amount of time that this is going to take into actually get all of these planning conditions of various types sorted before you can. It's not before you can get on site. This is to actually find out what actually is going to be built on site, more of the technical aspects. So, as I said, this is all part of the paperwork before you go to the tendering process, because actually other people don't know what to price for. You can go out pricing prior to this, and it will be subject to this being agreed, that being agreed. But again, that depends on who you are, what the nature and size of the project is, and the way that you like to do things. What we try and do is run a lot of parallel threads, get a lot of stuff going at the same time. Comes back to you need somebody to orchestrate that, which is the project manager. So in respect of the planning conditions, so some of the biggest things I see are underestimation of time, and certainly if it's reserved matters, people don't always understand the implications of only having outline permission. We've got one that's come to our desk today that's got outline consent for up to 67 dwellings. Up to 70 dwellings, sorry, but that scheme looks like it might end up nearer 50. From our first little look at it. So we've got to make sure that what we are gaining consent for, or what we perhaps site we're acquiring that's got consent, is what can we actually get sorted. And until you get those reserved matters, a lot of that detail just isn't known. So you don't even know the value of the site until some reserved matters are sorted out. So it can take quite a while to actually get these things done. And if you're looking for reports and surveys, for instance, whether it's conditions or reserved matters, and it's ecology related, so think things like bats and slow worms and stuff like that. There's certain times of the year that you can do this, and there's certain times of the year you can't. Nesting birds, there are certain birds at certain times of the year, whether outside of that 2-3 months thing, you can't do it. So if you miss the time slot to get that right survey done, you may well not even be able to go forward. So don't underestimate the time that actually this sort of pre-commencement conditions from a planning perspective are going to take. And we often see that planning departments and planning officers get blamed for the delays, and actually generally in our experience, it's generally that whoever is handling that application, whoever the developer is or whatever, there's a lack of coordination. So again, I come back to somebody needs to coordinate this. Our choice, as I've said a couple of times, is to use a project manager that is experienced in pre-construction. We'll bring all of these things together. So we're going to be talking about pre-construction for a few days, actually, because there's an awful lot of things to do in this process. So we're going to be talking about most aspects of it, most of the main aspects of it. So It's been Richard Little. I've been talking about pre-construction and discharging conditions, reserve matters and technical details in respect of pre-commencement from a planning perspective. So paperwork prior to getting on site. So at this point, when we're starting this, we could be many months away from getting on site. Yeah, hopefully it's weeks, but it could be months, depending on the size of the project. So it's been Richard Little from your land partner, and I will see you again in the next video. Take care.